What's good, y'all? Welcome to my review for episode 21 of Stone Ocean, another phenomenal episode. And it also seems the Rocky has claimed his first victim for part 6, being Ethan. Which was honestly a rather shocking, and I actually did a reaction to this episode, so the reactions should be up at the same time the reviews are, so you guys can check those out if you're curious. But yeah, pretty shocking. It seems like she's dead. Now, granted, she might be a fake out. She ends up somehow surviving it, since, Aragi did that before with FF a little bit earlier on, a couple episodes ago with the electric chair, but given the fact that JoJo death music was playing, I feel like that this one is permanent. Yes, she is dead. Dead and buried. She's dead. No more FF. She gone. That's how it seems. Could be wrong. We'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, man, this episode was fantastic. A lot of crazy shit. And yeah, let's just jump right in. So we start the episode off with some narration from both from the JoJo narrator as well as FF. The JoJo narrator explains that the one thing FF feared most wasn't her body vanishing, but rather losing her intellect. Then we go over to FF, and then she's remembered everything since she'd met Jolene, like the guards arguing, the smell of trash, etc., laughing hysterically with Jolene and the gang, and that before even though she spent like years inside the farm, she doesn't remember anything, and any thoughts she did have were more robotic, which was just protecting Pale Snake Sticks. And that's when she realized what living actually is. It's not just being alive, but it's also about making memories. And she explains about how Jolene has so much courage and fights for her father, and of course all the other people she trusts, like Hermes, because she has great memories with them, and that is what makes them special, and it's their memories, and that's what gives them courage, as well as it does for FF, the knowledge that she is FF. That's when we come back right to where we left off in the last episode, with Father Pucci giving her a dilemma. Do you kill DNG, or of course do you deal with Father Pucci as your top priority? She hesitates for a month before she decides to go and kill DNG. Father Pucci screams, "You hesitate! That will be your demise!" And then of course Pale Snake comes charging right towards her as FF fires her gun. She ends up missing because Pale Snake gets in her clutch enough to block off the shots, although one of them ended up like grazing his head a little bit. And then this is when my man Pale Snake just like slams his fist right into her head and just starts pulling and leaving her discus well before she starts pulling out, explaining that the reason why she even has intellect in the first place and power is because Pale Snake and Father Pucci gave them to her. And I thought this was really clever. Really cool editing trick, where as Father Pucci is like taking the disc out of her, you can see like the image of Jolene we saw earlier in the episode start to distort a little bit and kind of like disappear, but like the memories are fading from her as the discs are being pulled out. But then we get some narration from her saying that the one that whenever she's lacking courage, she just thinks about Jolene. That's when the picture comes back in frame, and she blows her own brains out, which was also kind of shocking. I was like, oh shit! Then she just basically just offed herself right there. And then because of the blood and everything, she manages to have her bodily fluids ooze into DNG, where it seems like she just like basically kills him from the inside out, because you see blood spurting everywhere, his head almost explodes, like blood spurting everywhere, and then you see FF with her rifle take the disc outside of the little cage on the outside of the ambulance where they usually keep the doctors and the patients are there, over into the driver's seat, as Father Pucci is telling Pale Snake to make sure he doesn't leave her, that FF doesn't leave his sight. And then we cut over to Jolene and Anastasia as they see that Yayama starts to disappear, and they realize, oh, cool, FF took care of the sand user, sick. And that's when they notice that the baby isn't there anymore. Where it should be was empty. But they see this little piece of the like embryo or whatever the fuck you want to call it by the propeller, and they see it move a little bit. Hands start to come out of it, and they're wondering what the hell that is. That's when they hit land, and the thing just kind of like disappears into the water for a bit. And we cut back over to FF, where Father Pucci asked him, what was the miracle inside the disciplinary life? Like the way this came off, and I don't mean this in like a disparaging way or anything. It's like if like someone described they saw Jesus and a Christian asked him what he looked like. You know what I mean? It kind of came off like that. Like I said, I don't mean that in a disparaging way or anything, but that's just the way the overall scene came off. And FF starts to stall for time. Like, oh, I don't really remember. I thought, oh, would it be drowned? Would it drown if it hit water? She was more or less stalling for time. And Father Pucci realizes, tells Pale Snake to look behind him, and that's when we see FF's legs going through the gate with the 2 CDs on it, which I'm assuming are the DNG's discs. So they get through the gate, and that's when she finds the water fountain. She opens it, and obviously, the water comes out there. She gets the second half of her body back. Which also, one thing I also thought was really interesting, as we see her also trying to start when she like starts the car back up, but of course it stalls, and Pale Snake just comes busting in through it, and like it comes busting in through it, man. Was I liked how FF's design changed when she's in, like, I guess, her plankton form, whatever you want to call it. Because originally, when we first saw her, she looked more alien like, more alien like. But after she kind of went back into that form, after she has taken over the body and become FF, her body started to morph more to what she looked like as FF. I thought that was kind of a nice little visual storytelling showing off how FF has gained like a sense of self. I thought that was pretty cool, man. And of course, FF starts talking shit that she's won the match. And I was gonna say, love the pose she did. Like once her body like kind of like came back, kind of like fully came back to her and could fully regenerate. I thought that pose looked really fucking cool. Once again, Father Pucci reiterates that he is the one that determines where FF's intellect goes and who gives it to her along with the powers. As he drops one of this, I'm assuming her CD. And I love the sound effect they played as it went in slow motion, the disc slowly descending down. I thought that was pretty cool. And then we get this amazing line from Pale Snake where he says, "You sentient bag of plankton! How dare you explain things to me with such utter tripe and arrogance! How dare you!" Literally, Young's performance here was fantastic, man. And not only him, the woman that plays FF, her performance was fantastic as well here, as her skin starts to bubble up, and of course, the JoJo death music starts playing as we watch FF's demise. FF cries, "Oh, why this is burning? Is this even water?" And of course, you have Five Weeks say, "Yes, of course this is water, but it is boiling hot." And he says like the temperature that most sea creatures can handle for water was like, I think he said like 89.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, he just happens to have a stand disc that where the stand power is just boiling water. And of course, we see him slowly put it into the, I guess, other half of FF's body that was right next to Pale Snake. And of course, she gets more and more engulfed in the water. Her body starts to boil more and more before she finally just explodes in traditional JoJo fashion before disappearing into dust as the song comes to an end. Also, I know I mentioned it once again, but shouts to FFVA, man. Her performance right here was fantastic, man. So yeah, it appears FF has died. That's how it seems to me. Now, Grant, like I said, because the Rocky did a fake out earlier on, this could be another one. But given the fact this had the JoJo death music playing and everything, I'm pretty sure it seems that FF is dead, and Rocky has claimed his first victim for Part 6. We'll have to wait and see on that. But afterwards, we are back with Jolene and Anastasia looking for the baby, but they eventually just see the baby crawling forward. So obviously they go chase after it, but eventually, as Jolene gets closer to it, she notices that the distance keeps going farther and farther, and that's when Anastasia tells her that she is actually shrinking. And then Anastasia comes in there. We also see that he's shrunk down, and that's when they start to realize that maybe the closer they get to the baby, the smaller and smaller they shrink. That's because they go backwards, and then boom, they're both back to normal size. Well, first off, Anastasia pushes Jolene back, and she gets returned to normal size while he's super small. But then when he walks back, they both return back to their normal height. This is when they start to realize that the closer they get to the baby, the smaller they shrink, as I mentioned before. And so we have like Anastasia creates like this little chart thing, where it's just like where you're like halfway there, you get like a half of the size, then you get a quarter of the way, you're a quarter of the size, and you get an eighth of the way, you're now at eight of small. Either way, the closer you will, it seems like how he's saying is the distance between you and the baby will always remain the same. You will just get smaller and smaller to maintain the same amount of distance, making you think you're getting closer when in fact you're not at all, and you're just getting shorter and shorter and shorter until I assume you just shrink to nothingness, whatever the case may be. Jolene, regardless of such, still needs just goes right after the baby, obviously, so she can get Jotaro's disc. And she tries to go over there, doesn't work. The baby actually grabs one of like this glass bottle. He messes around with it, just got pushed by it, keeps going. Jolene then uses her thread to try and get to the baby. Once again, it doesn't work because, of course, the same thing about the distance and them shrinking also applies to her thread, so that's not going to help either. So then Jolene actually has a bit of a clever idea. She jumps on top of one of the leaves there and then leaps from over there straight down towards the baby, thinking that would circumvent the thing. But it ends up not, because the closer she gets because as she throws her down, as her thread goes down to get the baby, it ends up getting caught by the baby's stand. Green Home, if I remember correctly, is the name of the stand. as they don't mention this in the actual episodes. Once again, one of those stands that just kind of you find out what the name was from the commercial cards, which would have made it very interesting for me to review this series if this was airing on Toonami, because Toonami would always cut cut the stand commercial cards when they aired the episode. Sometimes they would keep them. I think they did it a couple times with Golden Wind, but for like Star Wars Crusaders and Diamond Sparkle, they cut out the stand cards for whatever reason after the corner. I guess because the commercials are because Toonami got their own like commercial bumps. Whatever the case may be, they would usually just cut those when they aired on Toonami. Regardless of such, the stand, we find the stand, and it starts munching on her thread before it eventually cuts her down. Obviously, messing up her hand causes it starts bleeding, and then with the stand getting closer to her, she tries to use the thread on the stand, and it kind of works with wrapping it together, but he ends up breaking out of it because he keeps getting bigger and bigger while she gets smaller and smaller, and basically meaning even though she's falling downward, she's not going to get any closer to the ground because, of course, of all the shrinking, and she's worried she's going to shrink into nothingness. And then that's when Anastasia comes in the clutch, manages to get Jolene away from the stand enough to where they both can somewhat go back to normal, although it still looks like they were still pretty small, but they were at least more, shrinking any more than they already were. So they're not hanging on this cliff as the baby messes around with as a stand greenhouse messes around with like some rock he found there, and he just like tosses it up toward Jolene and Anastasia, or as actually the baby is holding onto Jolene too because she lost it during all the shrinking madness. And it starts off like a small little rock like it's supposed to be, and when it passes Jolene, but like the higher it goes up in the air, it like restarts its size and it comes down as a giant boulder on them. So they obviously start running away from it, barely managing to dodge it. The stand starts to chase after them, but then they end up trapping the stand inside the same glass bottle that the baby previously held earlier on in the episode. Also, guys, I love the sound design here for when Greenhouse was slowly approaching Jolene and Anastasia when they were in the glass bottle. You hear the dum dum dum. It also reminds me of like you've seen like monster movies or like Godzilla where you have like a cup full of water, you just hear the dum. You see it move. It also reminded me of those that scenes. Either way, I thought the sound effect they used for the stand, like approach them, show obviously sell the size of it, be like boom, boom. I thought it was really nice. So shout out to whoever did the sound design for this episode, whoever the sound designer was, and the sound effects people were, because I love the sound effect they chose for when the stand was slowly approaching them. Obviously, to sell the size between them. So once they noticed they're actually both inside the bottle, and Anastasia's plans that even that they couldn't get to the stand, they wanted to bring the stand to them and trapping it in there so they wouldn't have to deal with the shrinking anymore. I love Jolene's line here. It's like, cool, but how the fuck do you expect us to get out of here? Did you think of that? I love that line, man. I love Jolie, man. Kira's so fucking good as Jolie, man. Her performance in this series has been fantastic, man. Anyway, one thing I noticed that was kind of interesting is that if you were paying attention, you see the stand. It's like kind of like grabbing at the walls, trying to be like, what the hell's going on there when it's in the bottle. But interestingly enough, you see the baby also mimicking the stand's movement, like as if it's also stuck in the bottle, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I don't know if that means that the stand and the baby have some sort of connection like that, where like if the stand's in prison, that means the baby is also kind of in prison and it can't move. I don't know, but I thought that was kind of interesting when I saw that in the episode. So anyway, Diver Drive ended up moving the bottles and the entrance of the bottle basically up to the back side, so Jolie and Anastasia could get out of there. But the baby, I guess, also like FF, also has intellect, because the baby just kicks the bottle over and it ends up trapping Anastasia's legs in there, and they obviously can't get out there. They try to move it, they can't. Jolene starts using So Notion to crack the bottle, but obviously because cracking the bottle would also make the stand would get out, Anastasia tells her, don't do it, do not crack the bottle. Now, one thing I also found interesting around here is that there seems to be a bit of an animation error. Now I say that kind of hesitantly because I'm not sure if this is an animation error or that just something was just cut out or whatever. Because up to this point, you see Jolene is still wearing the jacket from the prison that she's worn throughout the entire episode. But once they cut to the close-up on Anastasia's face and back to Jolene, it's all of a sudden gone, with no mention or how it even got. Now, granted, she could have always just took it off screen, but I just thought that was odd, and it stays off throughout the rest of the episode. That's why I'm kind of hesitant to say this is an animation error or just what happened, because I don't know because it wasn't the same case back in Hero Rock season 5. You guys watch my Hero Rock reviews. I mentioned it, I want to say it was the second to last episode when Shigaraki was fighting Redestro, how I constantly mentioned how Bones couldn't decide if Shigaraki had his shoes on or not, because there'd be some shots where he had his shoes on, other shots where he was on barefoot, then they'd be back on again, and it was all over the place. That was probably definitely an animated error, and they just didn't catch it when it came to airing, and they probably fixed that in the Blu-ray when they made their mind. This, given this was in the rest of the episode, I'm pretty sure was done on purpose, or maybe D production was just really in a rush to get this episode out there because they just had a really tight deadline, and they're like, "Fuck it, just leave it, we'll fix it in the Blu-rays or something." I don't know, but I thought that was kind of odd how our jacket just magically disappears all of a sudden. Either way, the baby ends up touching Jolene, which returns her and Anastasia back to their normal size. The bottle is also cracked, and we also see the baby is holding onto Jolene. She's carrying it, and the baby starts kind of like grabbing at her star birthmark. And of course, Anastasia mentioned that this baby also has a stamped birthmark as well. Jolene's obviously confused on why she's holding this thing and what the hell is the big deal of it. And Anastasia mentioned that there's nothing from the but menace coming from the baby, and they're probably going to have to kill her to get Jojo's memories back. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the episode ends. Phenomenal episode as always, man. Absolutely loved it, man. Great shit. Yeah, so it seems like FF is probably dead. That would definitely be interesting if she is. But yeah, like I said, this could also be a fake out because Araki, Araki did this before with FF before. But given the death music was playing, I'm pretty sure it means she's dead. But we'll have to wait and see on that, as I mentioned before. Anyway, guys, overall, I give this episode a 9.5 out of 10, guys. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you like it, if you did, subscribe if you're new. Follow me on social media if you feel like it. Links down in the description box below. And as always, come back for more. See you guys next time.